Valeria Card Kingdom. So this is a tableau building game that seems to borrow mechanics from many games out there, and that's perfectly fine. There's a little bit of Settlers, a little bit of Machikoro, a little bit of Kingsburg, but it seems to me that the final result, when you put together all of those ingredients, is its own thing. This game definitely has enough personality to be its own thing, which is good. Again, when I mention connection similarities between a game and the other ones, I don't do it to reduce the originality of the new game, but simply to show a family resemblance. Everybody comes from somewhere, and so do games. In Valeria Card Kingdoms, the players play the role of dukes. Each player receives a card at the beginning of the game. You keep the card secret because each duke scores different things at the end of the game, and you don't want the other players to take advantage from that knowledge. Then what happens in the game? Players will roll dice, players will activate citizens that they collect during the game. The citizens will give you advantages. In particular, they will produce resources. Resources are gold, shields, that means hit points, attack points, and then we have magic. Magic can be used to replace gold or to replace hits, as long as there's at least one that is present. For example, if I need to pay something that is 3 gold, I could use a gold and 2 magic, 2 gold and 1 magic, but I could not use 3 magic. I could also use 3 gold, of course. Also, magic can be spent as its own resource when it is required for something that requires magic. So, how does the whole thing work? Well, let's take a look first at the tableau that we have here. This tableau it represents all the resources that are available that the players will collect during the game. You have more cards. Each resource is a stack, but again, you have more cards, you have more types, and this is just a possible setup. So you have variety there because each game you may have different combinations of monsters, so they're up there. Citizens and domains. As for the monsters, they are in stacks, and what you see here is the number of hit points that you need to produce to kill that monster, victory points that are generated, the reward that you get. For example, killing a goblin gives you 1 coin, and other symbols that may be used to fulfill certain conditions. Each type of monster is connected to a terrain, and within that terrain, the monsters are placed in ascending order of strength. As you can see, harder monsters are tougher to kill. This one requires 6 hit points as opposed to the standard goblin that only requires 1. And the same applies to other monsters. Each game you have 5 such stacks, and not only are they in ascending order of difficulty from top to bottom, but also the types are in ascending order of difficulty or strength from left to right, with these monsters here being the hardest to defeat. But also they give you more victory points, of course, and better rewards. And some rewards are, collect a citizen, do other stuff of that kind. Then we have the citizens. These really are the heart element, the heart of the game. Citizens, again, you have more than you see here, but it's very important when you select them, that you're placing them, that you look at these numbers here on the top left. These are activation numbers. You will want to have 1 for each kind, covering ranges between 1 and 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the last 2 ones are 9, 10, and 11, 12. And again, for each you have different types of citizens with the same activation numbers. So you have to cover the entire range, but you have a lot of variety in the way you can create the exact composition of the available citizens. So citizens have an activation number. Citizens have a cost. The basic cost is simply the number that you see there. The plus is a reminder of the fact that the cost is increased by 1 for each copy of that citizen that you already have. The first cleric that I collect costs 3, the second one 4, the third one 5, because I already have 2, 3 plus 2 is 5, and so on and so forth. Then we have symbols that can be used again to fulfill certain requirements. You need this symbol and that symbol to do that thing. Then I need to show that I have those symbols provided by my citizens. And super important, the effect, what the citizen does for me when it is activated. On the left, you have the effect that is produced when the citizen is activated during my turn. So basically, when you're the active player and your citizens activate, this is what they do. When this click is activated during my turn, that click produces 3 points of magic. On the right, bottom right, you have a symbol indicating what the character does when the character activates during someone else's turn. Yes, all characters may potentially activate every turn, which is totally neat. So you always stay engaged, you always get resources, or at least you often do. That means that when the click is activated during someone else's turn, the click still produces a point of magic for me. Other cards have different effects. For example, this one allows me during my turn to exchange a coin for 3 magic, and during someone else's turn to exchange a magic for 2 coins. The Archer is just your dependable killer, produces 2 hit points during your own turn, 1 hit point during someone else's turn. And if you have multiple copies, they all activate. So if I have 3 archers during my turn, when the archer type is activated, those 3 would produce a total of 6 points of hit points for me. The peasant and the knight, they produce basic income and basic hit points. The rogue is really neat because it produces during your turn both hit points and the money, and also does during other players' turn, not as much. The champion is very passionate to help you during your turn. During someone else's turn, he wants to be paid because when he activates in another turn, someone else's turn, you need to spend a coin to receive for hit points. This is the general idea. Then we also have domains. Domains are shuffled together. They come from a single deck. Shuffled at the beginning of the game. You form decks of 3, and the domain tells you how much it costs to buy it. Also, which icons provided by the citizens you need to show. So, for example, to conquer or build the rogue's landing domain, I need to show that I have these symbols provided by my citizens, plus I spend that amount of money and I acquired the card, goes in my area, will give me 3 points at the end, and also some give me an immediate advantage, some give me long-lasting advantages. What the domains do changes, of course, depending on the domain itself. And again, you really have a nice, healthy deck of domains to draw domains for. As for the turn structure, at the beginning of your turn, during the harvest phase, you roll these 2 6-sided dice. Oh, look, 2 and 4. And basically the characters, the citizens that activate are the ones indicated by the individual value on each die, so 2 and 4, plus the value indicated by the sum of the 2 dice. So this turn, in this harvest phase, after I roll, 2, 4, and 6, the blacksmith, the archer, and the knight activate. All the ones that are in play, controlled by players, activate. It is just that if I'm the active player, I activate my characters corresponding to those numbers and I get the better reward, which is during the active player's turn. Other players get the minor reward. So everybody who is not the active player, as an archer, collects 1 hit point. Me, I'm the active player, and I have the knight, and I collect 1 hit point, and so on and so forth. So the active player and the non-active players all collect resources based on the individual values plus the sum of the dice that were rolled. Then the active player gets to perform actions. What you can do, you have 2 actions which you can perform in any order, and those actions are to simply get a resource from from the general pool, in case you just need that one thing to complete whatever it is and you don't have better ways of acquiring a resource. Another action is to kill a monster. Then you simply discard the required amount of hit points and you kill the monster that is at the point visible. You collect the reward and you place the monster in your play area. That also makes other monsters available, visible and therefore available. So I can do that for an action. Another action that I can perform is to acquire a citizen. So in this case, I simply pay the corresponding cost. I acquire the citizen and I add it to my play area. That means after a while, I'll have my nice tableau. And probably towards the end, you'll be covering most options. You may have a copy of most of them. Then you're thinking, what is the strategy? Well, it's about the multiple ones. It's also nice and powerful to have certain combinations. Having one of each is usually a good idea, but leaving some spots uncovered and specializing in something and hoping that the something hits often is a strategy too. So another option, another action that you can take is to collect a citizen, which of course will increase your chances of getting resources later when the dice are rolled by you or by someone else. Another action that you can take is to build a domain, in which case you show you have the correct icons, you spend the required amount of gold, and you collect the card. And that's another action. Again, immediate advantage, possibly long-lasting advantage, victory points at the end. The game continues like this, rolling, collecting resources. The active player takes 2 actions and the next player goes. So the game continues like this until either all domains have been built or all monsters have been slain, or the number of exhausted stacks in the game is equal to twice the number of players, whichever happens first. At that point, you collect points from all possible sources, from the cards that you collected during the game, for monsters, for domains. Your duke will get to score. You may have victory point tokens that you acquired during the game because of specific game effects, and at that point, the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. I like this game quite a bit. It is simple, smooth, straightforward, and in a word, I would say gratifying. Now, there are a lot of deck building games or tableau building games in which you need to build your resources before you get your resources. You're creating an engine that gives you the good stuff, and so before you get there, you need to build the okay stuff that gets you there. And there are a lot of games in which the progression to that point where you really have a good engine and you're getting a lot of stuff from the table, the path to go there is not linear at all. It feels flat until it gets really steep, until all of a sudden you reach, let's say, a critical mass. Thunderstone would be a prime example where you're looking at those monsters and you're building your deck that then you will use to kill those monsters, and you stare at those monsters for a long time and you can almost kill none of them until at a certain point you can kill everybody. You really have that like turning point where all of a sudden you're super mighty. And there's something to be said for that kind of game. It is challenging to get there, and there is a big sense of reward, a big payoff when you get there. On the other hand, also they may feel a little bit underwhelming for the first part of the game as you're trying to get a good engine. Valeria Card Kingdoms takes a different road because from the beginning you can do stuff. Some of those monsters are super easy to kill. The goblins take a single point on melee. You can almost always kill somebody. So the point is not to have these grueling decisions. How do I get to the point where I can finally do something, which can be frustrating and pay off big later? It's more like, whoa, I have so many possible things that I can do. Which of the possible monsters that I could slay should I slay now, or maybe save up for the next turn and then I may be able to kill something really big? Which of these kingdoms should I get, or which of these citizens should I get? Or maybe I'll save up for the next turn to get a really huge kingdom. But every turn you have a bunch of options, and again, the decision doesn't feel too grueling because if you don't get something this turn, you probably will get it next turn. So that doesn't mean that the decisions are trivial, but it does mean that you have a sense of ease. You don't have a sense of tragedy that a single wrong decision will kick you out of the game because you'll fall behind the curve and never be able to catch up as other people's engine have reached that critical point. And if yours gets there 3 turns later than the other players, you're done. You get a sense that the game is very forgiving. The game is very relaxed. You're building an engine which is fairly decent to start with. You're getting good stuff, buying citizens, etc., and it can get really good and then excellent. But there's more of a linear, gradual progression, which is something that works very well if you're playing it as a family game, not with your hardcore friends, because then, of course, if you're playing with young gamers, it may be hard to get them passionate about the game, which really is an act of faith. Trust me, at some point when you'll be able to kill that monster or that gigantic Shiva dragon, you'll love it. But bear with me and go through the procedure for an hour before we get there. It is a game that immediately gives you small rewards. It has a reward schedule which is much more, again, gratifying. You're constantly getting something during other players' turns and during your own turn. That also means that even the high number of players, downtime is not much of a problem because you're getting stuff, you're getting excited. For each citizen, you have multiple copies. So yes, in the later game, citizen stack may get exhausted, but if there are a couple of players before me and they are all buying the same citizen, chances are that I will still get a citizen in most cases, the one that I want, even if other players are getting it. So I'm thinking about my strategy and collecting stuff. I'm feeling good about myself, and that is all interesting. I just so happen to have played Settlers of Catan last week. Settlers is a game that I like when it goes well. It doesn't mean that I win, it means that it goes along directions that keep me entertained. But there are also cases in which I find the game to drag too much and to have a lot of downtime because simply the game places such a huge emphasis on luck, of course, but even more so on initial placement. You probably have played Settlers in your life. If you are playing with players choosing where to place their settlements at the beginning, you place them not in the right position. After 2-3 turns, you already get the sense that you're not gonna make it because again you fell behind the curve pretty early, and then the game of course becomes boring as the people are trading and doing stuff, and you're sitting there waiting for resources. I happened to be that player last time. It wasn't the first time that happened to me. I feel bad when I see that happens to other players that are just sitting there not doing much. So I like Settlers when it goes well, but it doesn't have a checks and balance system there. If you don't have anything to trade, you can't trade. If you have anything to build, you can't build, and so on and so forth. Valeria Card Kingdoms, in that sense, is a more reliable game. I would play this one any day of the week rather than to play Settlers. Sorry, friends. Yes, Settlers also have all those other elements, the spatial elements, etc., etc. It's more subtle, but the possibility that someone will be bored around the table is considerable, and I don't like that all that much. This one is a game that truly and honestly keeps you entertained all the time. Now, in its one of its strongest elements, which is it's so accessible, it's so smooth, it's so intuitive, and always gets you something. It can also be maybe one of the limits that will make this game for many people, but not for everybody, precisely because you don't have that epic feeling of accomplishment. You don't have that clear of an arc. It's rewarding all along, but you don't have the big payoff that you had to build towards for most of the game. So there is that element. You don't have that epic release of endorphins. Yes, I destroyed the villain. It took me only 6 hours to get there, but totally worth it. Yeah, sometimes you had the sense that the last part of the game may be a little flat because it's not all that different from the previous ones. So you don't have, again, that steep sense of progression, which is a plus for most players. It is for me in most cases because I play a lot of games with my daughters, and this is a game that I can play with my 7-year-old. No problem. Again, not just because of the complexity, but also because of the psychological engagement. But it is not a game that maybe I will play with some of my more hardcore friends, because I already know some of my friends will say, that's cute, it's a cute game, and that's okay. They wouldn't be bored, but they wouldn't get into it so much. It is a light game. It is a light game which feels a little bit like Settlers, the dice game, or Settlers, the tableau game. It has elements from Kingsburg, Machikoro, other elements. And as a light game, I think it does what it does very well, because it is entertaining, it is engaging, you're always doing stuff, you have a lot of options, and you don't have a deep sense of tension. Which, when you're in the right mood, that's precisely what works. As a little more of a relaxing game after a grueling, hardcore economic game that you played for most of the night, this could be a nice palate cleanser. Maybe it's not going to be the main course of your game night when you're playing with your adult, committed, hardcore friends, but as and something between the acts, between the main acts of a game night, as something as a lighter choice, or as a family game, then this is a really good game. Again, doesn't have the epic payoff, but also doesn't have the pain of some bigger games. And for what it is, for a light, simple, smooth, family-friendly game, I think that Valeria Card Kingdoms, yes, Valeria Card Kingdoms is a really good game.